It's a pleasure to be here. I really get a tremendous amount of satisfaction in being able to speak about the Homeward Bound program because I think we're a very unique model that looks to changing the trajectory of our women, and basically our target audience is single moms. And the program started in 2004 and really came about as a response to the Ann Golden report, which looked at the number of families and children in the shelter system and what was really needed in order to be able to really support the change in these families' direction. There were many different programs that offered solutions that would be sort of part of the solution, but there were very few programs that really looked at what were really the largest barriers that affected the forward trajectory of these families to get out of poverty, essentially. And there were three really important barriers that were identified. The first one, and all of these have been alluded to today, in fact, so it really is kind of, again, just a reiteration of what has been discussed. So the first barrier was affordable housing. And the reason why that was a barrier was because many of the women in their lives as single moms would be working, so work was not the issue, but the amount of work they got, the kind of jobs they got, really interfered with how much they could afford. So many of the women in our program had, as I said, been working, been on that kind of trajectory, but could never really get ahead because the kind of money they would earn never really allowed them to kind of live securely in whatever places they had. So often they'd have to move, often they were in arrears, sometimes they were in relationships that they had to leave from, and so on and so forth. So the first barrier that we saw to be important in terms of facilitating this change in these women's lives was affordable housing. The second one was affordable childcare, because again, many of our women worked and were not able to afford because of their salary and also because of the nature of childcare. Childcare usually runs from 7 in the morning till 6 at night. For those of you that have explored the labor market, you probably know now it's a 24/7 system. With many jobs that require overnight shifts, call centers that work on many, many different hours. And so our women's capacity, or many women's capacity to work, was again stopped because they simply did not have access to an infrastructure that allowed them to put their kids in a safe place if they would want to take shift work. So that's two. So homelessness or housing, childcare, and the third one that was seen as a huge barrier was education. I mean, Canada is a knowledge-based economy, and it's very, very, very difficult to get any kind of meaningful work unless you have some sort of education, particularly in the post-secondary realm. So Woodgreen, as a very large agency, was able to kind of look at all those variables. And we were very, very fortunate on a number of levels. One, Woodgreen has a very large housing unit per se. And through some angel benefactors, we were actually able to construct a building that would house 32 families. And that was strictly dedicated to the Homeward Bound women. Okay, so here, and that this housing that was built was rent geared to income. So in other words, there was a relationship with the city, and the city would subsidize the rent, and the women would pay according to their income, what they could afford. So in our case, most of the women are on Ontario Works, so their rent for a 2-bedroom apartment out of their pocket would be somewhere in the range of $270, $280 a month. And market rent for a similar place would be about $1,200 a month. So though they were living on limited incomes, their rent was also in relationship to what they were actually earning. So this kind of mitigated some of that issue. The second thing is that we developed a relationship with Toronto Children's Services, and in our relationship with Toronto Children's Services, we, because many of our women were on OW, and we constructed a program where our outcomes, the trajectory was that the women would be, at least 75% of the women would be off OW at the completion of the program. Toronto Children's Services saw that as a sound financial investment. In other words, they were willing to pay for or subsidize the women's children entering into the Homeward Bound program so that the women could then have access to the services that we offered, because without affordable childcare, the women would not be able to fully participate. So that was the second thing we offered, is that, and Woodgreen, again, being a multi-service agency, we also had 7 childcare centers. So there was a childcare center that was built exactly next door to the building that was being built for the women. The third thing that we offered for the women was free tuition and books for a 2-year college program. And because we considered philosophically what it would look like if the women had to go through OSAP, which they could. But many of our women were already in debt. Many of them had very poor credit, because when you're sort of moving around a lot and you get into arrears a lot, typically one of the things that tends to kind of go downhill very, very quickly is payment and arrears and so on and so forth. So we, as an agency, felt philosophically to have them incur some more debt, and following the program, you know, if you're entering at an entry-level position of $35,000, $40,000 a year, you know, removing yourself again would be creating another barrier after we had created all these possibilities. So as an agency, we chose to say we will fundraise for that money, and that is what we continue to do. So all the money for the tuition, which is our single largest operational line, is privately raised. So we are always chasing money. So I really just want to kind of put that in, chasing money, and we as a program offer these kinds of services. So you can imagine that women who hear about our services think they've died and gone to heaven. Because here it is. This is a program where they get safe housing, they get free childcare, subsidized childcare, and they get to go to school. And so they come to us and they say, oh my God, what's the catch? You know, and we say, well, fundamentally, this is not the main event. The main event is that these are supports and they're ancillary to your moving forward on that kind of trajectory to economic self-sufficiency. So basically, you really are going to have to do the work, because the system isn't kind. The institutions don't really care about the fact that your kid's been up till 3 a.m. and you cannot write that exam, or that you want to take sick leave because you've got to take care of things. It's a difficult environment in which to survive if that is really your goal. And so the women hear us, but don't really hear us. Because really for them, this is an absolutely wonderful opportunity. So you might want to ask, and even if you don't want to ask, I'll answer, about who would be a good participant. Because I really will be honest and straightforward at this point, it is not a program for everyone. We have 76 spots because we have built a second building. And so we've got 76 families. We take anybody from anywhere. We've had people from Manitoba. We've had people from, the north. We've had people from Quebec and so on and so forth. So our mandate is very broad geographically, but we are very, very particular about who is a good fit for the program. Because we know that as a program, for it to be successful, there needs to be a huge amount of capacity, buy-in, resilience, participation on the people who are involved. Because you know probably from any of the work you do, you can provide supports from here to tomorrow, and they can be luxurious, they can be minimal, they can be medium, but unless the person themselves wants to kind of move forward on their own, those supports will continue to not be used efficiently. So we as a program, as I say, really see our mandate as to being able to fit the right person into the slot, because our program is very expensive. And we go about that in a number of ways. One of the ways we go about that is we do a tremendous amount of outreach. 2 minutes left? Okay. Tremendous amount of outreach to our partners, shelters, etc. We do a very intensive intake process. The women have 3 interviews, and really, in essence, what we are looking for is, and what is always striking to me whenever we interview our women, is their sense of hope. And that seems to be the transcendent thread that runs through all our participants. And many of them have horrific stories to tell. I often sit there and wonder how they aren't just sitting in a corner and rocking and having given themselves up to despair. And what I really am struck at is that they see this opportunity and they themselves say, I'm going to grab hold of this, because if I don't grab hold of this, then my life's trajectory, I know what that looks like. So Homeward Bound offers, as I said, that myriad of support. We do case management with the women, but what's really, really key is the partnership between our staff, the program, the structure, and the quality of the women participating. Because I can say without a doubt, there's probably not a single woman who goes through this program who at some point or other doesn't say, I can't do this. It's way too complicated, because they've added on a whole other series of demands on their plate. I'll just finish off by saying one of the advantages that we have, because essentially Homeward Bound is an employment program, is that everything is looked through the lens of how can we help these women navigate to sustainable employment. One of the things that we do have is a relationship with industry called our Industry Council, where they have committed to providing internships for our women. They've committed to providing resources to our women. They have committed to providing sessions, coaching to our women. And most important, they have committed to providing access to employment. Because our women's network, all of you who know that, finding employment really requires a decent network. And most of our women don't have that network. So that our Industry Council provides that network, which allows our women to get access to many, many kinds of systems. And I'll just finish with one point. And what we do is we align the education piece in college to the employment piece at the end, so that the women choose from a menu of programs that at the end of the day align with entry-level positions that are within the purview of our existing Industry Council. We'd love to have healthcare on our Industry Council, but we don't as yet. So practically, as I say, we look at programs that fit our Industry Council mandate. Am I over? No. Okay. And so thank you. I'd love to hear any questions from you. Thank you.